Okay, good morning, everyone. I think I can safely say good morning. Welcome to Dakota's second quarter EHS Regulatory Roundup webinar. I'm Bob Kimball. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Dakota, and I'm joined today by Jennifer Mester, one of our in-house regulatory analysts. So this is our second Regulatory Roundup webinar. It's part of a quarterly series that we launched at the beginning of the year to help bring clarity to kind of what is a rapidly evolving and increasingly volatile regulatory landscape. So over the next 15 minutes, Jennifer will provide a high-level overview of some of the key regulatory developments from the second quarter. After that, I'm going to share a little bit about how Dakota can help organizations stay ahead of these changes and manage compliance efforts. So a quick housekeeping note. Well, everyone is muted right now, but we definitely want participation. We're going to do a survey, a poll halfway through to kind of get the pulse of the group. And then we do have a Q&A that's going on, so you can submit questions anytime you think of it, and then we're going to address as many questions as we can at the end. And with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Bob. As Bob said, I am Jennifer, and I am a member of our regulatory team here with Dakota Software. I've been with Dakota for about 2 years, but I have been in the EH&S space for about 20 years prior. So as far as who we are in the regulatory group, we are made up of environmental professionals like myself. We also have scientists and environmental attorneys in our group. We research new and proposed EHS regulations every single day. We are analyzing the regulations and we create applicability and checklist questions and summary information for our users. We help users understand if a regulation is applicable to their operations and what their requirements are. So just for some housekeeping here, we want to acknowledge that talking about federal regulations, especially during an administration transition, has a political undertone. But we also want to stress that Dakota does not take a political stance. We are on the side of industry. We are here to support you. We are not for or against any specific regulation, and we always take a neutral stance on regulations. We alert users to all changes in regulations, whether that's new requirements that are added, existing regulations that are removed, or anytime any other changes are made. So I want to kind of tie this into our Q1 webinar. In Q1, we talked about what can be expected during the transition time following an administration change. We talked about the uncertainty that follows an administration change, including more activity from the outgoing administration and rule freezes and postponements from the incoming administration. In the first quarter, we started to see the first congressional disapproval activity, and executive orders were issued to initiate a deregulatory effect. Specifically, we discussed President Trump's 10 out, 1 in executive order and EPA's deregulatory plans targeting specific areas of environmental regulation. We are still in the early stages of the new federal administration, and the regulatory landscape remains anything but normal right now. Congressional disapprovals are still ongoing. I'm going to talk a bit more about how this congressional action is impacting the regulatory climate still in Q2. I'm also going to talk a little bit about how agencies are starting to respond to the president's deregulation initiative. So let's get started with congressional disapprovals. Just as a reminder, what a congressional disapproval is, they can be used by a new administration to overturn regulations which went into effect within the last 60 legislative days of the prior administration. Generally, they're targeting regulations that are not in alignment with the new administration's priorities. And this requires passing by the House, the Senate, and then presidential signature to sign it into law. So obviously Dakota tracks the Federal Register every day, but Dakota's regulatory team is also tracking the progress of congressional disapprovals through congress.gov. Obviously, congressional disapprovals are only happening during an administration change, but when this happens, it's super important to track the congressional disapprovals in addition to just reviewing the Federal Register. There's always going to be a lag between the time that a rule is no longer in effect after being signed into law by the president and when the agency removes the rule text from the CFR, and the changes are then published in the Federal Register. So there are 12 regulations that Dakota is currently tracking through the congressional disapproval process. I have these all up on here on this slide. You'll also note the dates that the original rule was promulgated, along with its FR number and the title of it, just in case there's anything on this list that interests you. I'm not going to talk about these in a lot of detail, obviously, because of the timing of this presentation, but I have broken these down on the next few slides to give you an idea of where the regulations are in the process and what this process looks like. So the rules up here are in the first step of the congressional disapproval process. These congressional disapprovals have been filed. They're currently working their way through the House and the Senate. I want to call out just two of these more higher profile rules that are on this list. The lead and copper improvements rule is here. That strengthened national primary drinking water regulations by requiring certain things of drinking water systems, such as replacing lead in certain galvanized service lines, enhancing lead monitoring and public education measures. It also required lowering the lead action level and eliminating the trigger level. And then the phase down of hydrofluorocarbons is also on here. This established HFC emissions reduction and reclamation programs, mandating leak repair protocols, automatic leak detection systems, the use of reclaimed HFCs in service and installation, cylinder reclamation before disposal, and then reporting, labeling, and record keeping provisions. The three rules you see here have made it through the congressional disapproval process, and these have all been signed into public law and are no longer in effect. I have the dates up on the screen and the public law numbers if there's anything on here that interests you. On the list, I do want to point out we have EPA's reclassification of major sources as area sources under the Clean Air Act, and also EPA's amendments to the rubber tire manufacturing NESHAP. So although no longer in effect, these rules have not yet been removed from the CFR by the agency, and because they haven't been removed from the CFR, these rule changes have not yet appeared in the Federal Register. And one interesting point I want to make here, if you look at the list, there is one rule that was signed into law in mid-March, and the rule still remains in the CFR. And this kind of backs up why at Dakota we are tracking congressional disapprovals in addition to monitoring the Federal Register, because both sources of information are necessary to understand the status of any rule that is in the congressional disapproval process. So one last rule to highlight, this is the waste emissions charge rule. This completed congressional disapproval in March. We did talk about this in the Q1 webinar. What is new is that the text has been removed from the CFR in May. So if you aren't familiar with the regulation, EPA finalized this to impose and collect an annual charge on certain methane emissions from petroleum and natural gas facilities. And just as an example of the timeline of the congressional disapproval process, this final rule was promulgated on November 18th, 2024 by the Biden administration, and it became effective January 17th, 2025. On March 14th, 2025, the president signed Public Law 119.2, and the rule was no longer effective. The EPA removed all of the regulatory text from the CFR on May 19th, 2025. So during our Q1 webinar, we also discussed the 10 out, 1 in executive order. So President Trump issued an order titled Eliminating 10 Regulations for each new regulation issued. The order required that whenever an agency promulgated a new rule, regulation, or guidance, it must identify at least 10 existing rules, regulations, or guidance documents to be repealed. For fiscal year 2025, the total incremental cost of all new regulations, including repealed regulations, must be less than 0. So back in Q1, we knew the rule existed. What we didn't really know is how agencies would respond to the directive. In Q2, we've started to see some examples of agency actions that appear to be a direct result of this order. So I'm just going to run through a couple of examples here of things that we've seen. On May 30th, the Department of Transportation issued 18 proposed rules and 3 final rules, all associated with regulation repeals or removal of specific requirements. So none of the individual regulatory updates issued were either broadly applicable or huge, big changes. But the issuance of this many regulatory changes at one time is unusual. And that's really the story here. This seems to be an example of how an agency is actually responding to President Trump's deregulatory initiative. So obviously I'm not going to go through all of these here, but just a few examples to share. So there was a proposed rule which removed the self-reporting requirements. This was a proposal to remove requirements that CDL holders report when they're convicted of certain motor vehicle violations in another state. And what the agency indicated with this is that the proposed repeal is because this is a redundant requirement, as states have been fulfilling this task using electronic reporting requirements since 2024. There was also an instance of 9 separate proposed rules issued regarding parts and accessories necessary for safe operation. One of these was for license plate lamps, and it requires that there's a new exception for license plate lamps on the rear of truck tractors while towing a trailer. The update actually adds text to the CFR, but because the text is removing a requirement, it would still be considered a deregulatory action. What we found interesting is that all 9 updates could have been issued under one proposed rule. They're affecting necessary parts and accessories, and they have generally the same purpose to reduce the regulatory load. However, the agency very specifically chose to issue these as 9 separate updates. There's also a final rule which repeals the motor carrier routing regulations, which concern servicing municipalities and unincorporated communities. The agency deemed these regulations unlawful because they exceeded the agency's authority. This specific final rule represents the removal of regulatory requirements, but also aligns with a stated goal of the federal administration to ensure that agencies are not overstepping their allotted authorities. So there was a second very significant day of regulations and deregulation. On July 1st, the Federal Register included, among other updates, 88 separate updates from OSHA, Mine Safety and Health Administration, and Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. Many of these included either regulation repeals or removal of certain requirements. As with the May DOT updates, many of these individual regulations were small updates that could have been combined into fewer, more significant rule updates. But again, the agencies chose to issue multiple small updates. And one more thing I want to mention, although very preliminary, something we have noticed are numerous information collection activities published in the Federal Register regarding NESHAPs and NSPS. On June 20th, there were 6 different notices published, and we have seen additional notices coming through as well. This is significant not because any specific regulation changes have been proposed or finalized at this time, but because it indicates that proposed changes will likely follow. When the EPA published their deregulatory goals back in March, NESHAPs were on the list of regulatory areas that they intended to target. So although this is not something that's going to impact you right now, it's an example of the beginning stages of the EPA's potential deregulatory actions and something that will need to be monitored for future action. So we've talked about some trends of things that we're seeing. I want to take a few minutes to discuss some of the specific regulatory updates that have happened in Q2. And specifically during the Q1 webinar, we talked about delays in compliance dates that were expected. So I have 3 examples here from the EPA from Q2 where there were postponed compliance dates. So first, the EPA stated certain provisions of the Integrated Iron and Steel Manufacturing NESHAP. These were added or revised by the April 2024 final rule. And the EPA said that it had the intent to reconsider workplace standards during the time of the stay. The stay delayed compliance with the provisions until July 1st. There were some extensions for the reporting deadline under greenhouse gases. EPA extended the reporting deadline for annual greenhouse gas reports for 2024 data to ensure that entities had adequate time to prepare and submit reports. And this was because of issues and delays in launching the electronic reporting system. The reporting extension does not change reporting deadlines for future years and does not change the requirements for what entities must report. We have one regarding PFAS data. So the EPA amended the data submission period for the PFAS reporting rule. Again, due to constraints and issues with testing and developing the software for collecting the information. The updated data submission period begins on April 13th, 2026 and ends on October 13th, 2026 with an alternative end date of April 13th, 2027 for small manufacturers reporting exclusively as article importers. And I just want to mention one kind of high profile proposed rule that we saw in Q2. The Fish and Wildlife Service proposed to remove the definition of harm from the Endangered Species Act. which sounds kind of like a small thing, but there's actually some pretty big repercussions of that. The proposed removal of the definition of harm removes protections for the habitat of endangered and threatened species. And what it pretty much says is that significant habitat modification or degradation where it kills or injures wildlife by significantly impairing essential behavior patterns, including breeding, feeding, or sheltering, would no longer be considered harm under the Act. So, in quarter one, we talked a little bit about the potential for state regulations to take on a more important role if the federal government begins to remove regulations. State regulations are not new. States have always been able to create their own regulations. State regulations must be as stringent as the corresponding federal regulation, but they can be more stringent with additional provisions or requirements. It's expected that as the federal government continues to push for federal deregulation, states may take some of their own actions, and they have the right to do that. Some states may also pursue a deregulatory push, like the federal government. Other states may create additional regulations to pick up where federal regulations leave off. And some states may seriously do nothing. They may not change the way they regulate things. But it's more important now than ever for companies operating across multiple states to be aware of state-specific regulations, which could include different or additional requirements from the federal regulations. So we're still new in the federal administration's policies, but what are we seeing so far? We have seen some state level regulation changes in quarter two. Um, Specifically, greenhouse gas regulations and recycling regulations seem to be more frequent at the state level right now. Massachusetts issued a new greenhouse gas reporting rule regarding building energy reporting. New Jersey updated their electronics recycling rules. California added dealer registration and cooperative regulations to existing recycling regulations. There's also been some state movement on non-greenhouse gas and recycling regulations as well. Nevada has a new heat illness program. There are other states with these, but this seems to be the newest. Arizona has a new coal combustion residuals permitting program. Are any of these directly associated with the federal administration? Maybe or maybe not. They could be things that were coming. Obviously, state regulations take time to work through the process as well. But I think we're going to see more of these going forward. There are also some examples of decreased state level regulations, and these are a direct result of the federal changes. Missouri removed all of their waste regulations that were more stringent than the federal waste regulations. And Indiana has issued numerous notices from the governor's office directing agencies to identify regulations more stringent than the federal regulations. This seems to be a precursor of potential regulation repeals or changes within the state. So where do we go from here? We're going to continue moving down the path we're on. We're still in the early stages of the new administration, and we're going to continue moving down this path. We're going to see more CFR text changes, specifically where we've had congressional disapprovals, either those ones that have been approved and are no longer effective and they need to be removed, or others as they move through the process. More agencies are likely going to issue frequent minor changes or repeals. We've seen this, as I noted above, but it's also been through other agencies as well that are beyond the EHS space. There's going to be continued enforcement discretion and postponement of effective dates where agencies can do that. And we think you're going to start to see more state regulation changes directly driven by federal changes as we move forward. Again, there's a process for states as well, so it's not going to be an immediate thing. And with that, that wraps up my regulatory summary. I'm going to pass this back over to Bob.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. That was an amazing amount of information in 15 minutes. We're going to pause just right now to take a short poll. I'm going to launch right now, so everyone should see on their screen a poll related to future trends, some of the future trends that Jennifer just outlined. And so the question here is, which future trends do you see creating compliance challenges for your team? And so this is a multiple choice, choose all the ones that apply to you. And we'll go ahead and we will share those results in just a second here so that everyone on the call can get a sense of the sentiment of the group. So I see responses coming in. And as you do that, I'm going to go ahead and switch screens here. All right. And we'll give everyone just a few more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and share those results out. And I'm identifying some clear winners here. Um, okay, looks like mostly everyone has completed that, so I'll go ahead and end this poll. Now everyone should be able to see results on their screen. And we can see here state regulation changes was definitely the winner, and then the frequent and minor changes from various agencies second.
I do see at least some people, everybody on here thought probably something impacted them, but you notice we have somebody who has picked at least everything. So kind of what I was thinking, and very much as you would expect, this is going to be disruptive to business. This is going to impact people.
Right. Okay, very good. Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Jennifer. All right, I'm going to pull that down so that should disappear. And Uh, before I continue, I just want to do a quick reminder that anyone can ask questions. If anything that Jennifer shared sparked a question in your mind, go ahead and put those through the Q&A panel, and we'll get to those in a few moments here. Before we do, I just want to provide a short overview of Dakota Solutions, some of the ways that we help our clients to understand these type of regulatory changes and manage their programs related to it. So again, I know that we have clients on the call, but there's also a lot of people who maybe have never heard of Dakota. We have been serving the EHS space for more than 35 years now. We began 1988 with an environmental auditing tool, and while audit is still a central part of our compliance solutions, we've shifted to a more proactive approach for EHS compliance management. So our solutions really, the common thread here is they really are designed to help rein in the chaos of EHS compliance by delivering timely, relevant regulatory intelligence. And we're going to outline some of the ways we do that. One of the ways we do it right now is with the Regulatory Alert Service, which we recently made free to the global EHS community. So these are email alerts that cover federal EHS related regulatory topics. The emails include plain language overviews. They list the related citations. They link to the full text regulations. But before you go rushing to sign up, and I will share a link at the end of how you can do that if you wish to. I like to kind of distinguish between with this free service and then the type of regulatory information we deliver through our solutions, through our software solutions. So while software is in our name, we're definitely more than a software company. As Jennifer pointed out, we have an in-house team of regulatory experts who are continually reviewing the Federal Register and refining a regulatory database that is integrated into our software solutions. In addition to this, we have a compliance services arm who they possess both EHS experience working in the field, but they also have deep product knowledge, and they are available to help our clients utilize the platform to the best of its ability and ultimately to help them achieve their EHS compliance goals. So this really is kind of a unique combination that we offer, and it's really centered around this idea of site-specific applicability, which is really the concept that allows us to deliver meaningful and relevant regulatory intelligence. So again, these updates become the fuel for our clients' EHS programs. And I had a little animation on these gears, but I couldn't get it to work right, so I stopped. But the concept here is that the regulatory database continually updated is what prompts the maintenance of accurate legal registers, compliance calendars, audit protocols, and inspection templates. Here, I'm just going to do a couple of quick screenshots to kind of demonstrate what this looks like within the proactivity products. Here we see an applicability question and how it's presented in proactivity. So this is not just a simple filter of citations. There's a decision tree logic that intelligently guides users through an analysis and provides regulatory clarification along the way. There's a profile gauge that shows the completeness of the profiles, and it helps to prompt review as the database is updated and more changes have to be made. It prompts review of that. Proactivity users tell us almost always this analysis results in the identification of requirements that they were not previously aware of. Next, Jennifer discussed how state requirements are creating more challenges than ever before, especially for multi-site organizations. So Dakota's regulatory team tracks state requirements as exceptions to federal requirements, and here we can see how they're presented in line with the federal requirements in the library. Again, well, with referencing support materials and summaries to help understand the context of the changes. Um, Also, Jennifer mentioned how congressional disapprovals are impacting compliance efforts. And here we can see again how our regulatory team is providing guide notes with the supporting information relevant to the topic. So this is not just for the congressional disapprovals. This is throughout the products where our regulatory team will convey additional information to help users of the products understand the spirit of the law as well as the letter of the law. And finally, I wanted to circle back around to regulatory alerts I mentioned earlier. So unlike the free alerts that we provide through our sign up on our website, our the ones that come from our product also cover state changes as well as special topics such as pipeline safety, MSHA, and other industry-specific requirements. But more importantly, these alerts aren't just change notifications. They're notifications of relevant changes, things based on site profiles. So each of these links to a detailed report of which domains per profile are affected, and it really helps organizations understand the impact of changes that are pending or just came through. All right, so how can Dakota help you? So leveraging this regulatory database and this decision tree engine, you can, using our tools, or you can work with us to help identify and create regulatory registers for your facilities. So if you're in need of compliance services, our teams cover everything from remote and on-site audits to full managed services where we'll actively keep your legal registers and compliance plans up to date for you. So this is a quick graphic that kind of distinguishes between the different ways that we support clients. So depending upon your needs, we have a quick start kind of essentials package that starts with a services engagement to identify legal registers, and then our teams create compliance task specific and inspection templates to help you get started quickly. And then for those who want to take full control of their programs, our Proactivity Suite is what I was demonstrating before, and that combines that integrated regulatory database with these feature-rich tools for managing compliance plans, audits, etc., with or without the support of our compliance services team. So, okay, let's move on to Q&A here. I'm going to pause just again to take some questions. And as we do that, I am going to launch just a final poll to get feedback on how we did here today. So you guys should see that. Feel free to answer it at your leisure. There's also some information on the screen right now for how you can sign up for those alerts. And we're also offering a free trial of our inspection task management platform. So if you want to take that for a test drive, you can use the link on the screen to sign up for that. All right, so thanks. I see questions coming in here. And let's see. Is it possible to get regulatory support for legal registers for European laws? Okay, so asking about EU and some other countries. Yes, through a partnership. So our in-house regulatory teams focus on U.S., federal, state requirements. Through a partnership with an organization called NHASA, we actually have we can offer their international regulatory coverage through our products. So this is deep regulatory coverage at the U.S. Within the U.S. and then broad coverage for those who have operations outside of the U.S. to help them to manage compliance globally. That was a good question. Thank you. All right. I see a question here related to mobile software tools. Yes, that's definitely something Dakota offers, especially the inspections and task management platform that I showed kind of as the essentials package. That is optimized definitely for use for mobile. All the tools can be used for mobile, but that product features specifically a optimized mobile experience so people can complete tasks, conduct inspections from any type of device, from a mobile device, from a tablet, or a laptop. All right, and we'll pause again for any specific questions anyone has. And if anyone thinks of questions after the fact and you want to reach out to us through our website, definitely feel free to do that and we will respond to you ASAP. Okay, it looks like that is going to do it for regulatory for the questions there. I If there's nothing else, I guess we'll do it right at on the 11:30 mark. So I want to thank Jennifer for the overview. I thought that was excellent information, presented very concisely, which is a real challenge to do, I think Jennifer will tell you. And I want to thank everyone for taking time to join us today. Okay, thank you very much and have a great day.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.